Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out on this cold night. My name is Tammy Gaskell. I'm the library director here at the Rojan Library, and I'm delighted to introduce Phyllis Carito, who I gather many of you know. She has taught a poetry class here before. She's presented here before, local poet, author, educator, with many books to her name. And she is here to talk about her latest work, More Than Making Ends Meet. So I'll turn it over to Phyllis, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and conversation afterwards.
Thank you, Tammy. And welcome everybody. I appreciate you being here via Zoom. It's really touches my heart that you've all signed in or made your way here tonight. I want to thank Tammy, who just went out of the room, for letting me introduce my book here, and also for setting up everything, the Zoom and contacting people. And I do want to take another moment to just thank Pat, who has been manning my book table, and that really means a lot, and it really helps me with these readings. So as you can hear, I'm having a little trouble with my voice. I'm just coming off of laryngitis, but I might squeak a little, but I will hopefully project and you can all hear me. If you can't hear me on the Zoom, I don't know, wave, and one of you guys will let me know somebody's waving, okay? So yes, I'm here to talk to you about my new book, More Than Making Ends Meet. And it's a story about two women who are struggling to make ends meet and who become friends over time. Viviana, when we meet her, is cleaning houses, and she likes to share stories about the people in the homes that she goes to. And Kathleen, the other woman, she likes to listen to the stories, but Kathleen is tentative and uncomfortable to tell her own story, especially in the beginning to Viviana. So this is a novella, which is a very short work of fiction. I particularly like short works of fiction. It always takes me back to when you were in school and you read The Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, or Of Mice and Men by Steinbeck. And one of my favorites, As We Are Now by May Sarton. If you don't know that one, it's a good one. And I've always liked short stories, because short fiction, short stories, they're like a peek in the window, or being a fly on the wall for just that moment of some conflict or change or concern in someone's life. And after that look, the curtain closes again. Why do I like that? Well, as a writer, I like to complete a project, and the thought of a 600-page or a 1,000-page novel feels overwhelming to me. And I think because I've always identified first as a poet, the idea of the depth of meaning coming from a condensing of words makes sense to me. So for those reasons, but also because I think it's the way we live, the way we share stories, little by little over time. The author, Sue Monk Kidd, has been quoted as saying, "In a way, humans are not made of skin and bones as much as we're made of stories." And I believe that's true. Every day we tell stories. What we did at work, who we met at the grocery store, that maniac who almost drove us off the road. We come home and we tell stories, we share stories. And that's what these two women do as they build their friendship over time and over the connections that they uncover and embrace. It's like you meet somebody and you find out something, just maybe one thing, like, oh, you grew up in the Bronx too. And then the next time you find out more, and those connections build. I give that nod to all my Bronx people here tonight. And I also want to give a nod to all the women in my life and how they've inspired me with their own pursuits and accomplishments and strengths, and supported me and these characters who live in my head, who develop in my head, and then become part of my writing endeavors. I appreciated that support all along. And in some ways, they are always reflected in little pieces of the characters that I create. So what I've done with this novel is that when Viviana shares her stories, she tells these stories that are 6 separate embedded short stories in the book. So there's the overarching story of Viviana and Kathleen, and then there's these 6 stories about totally different people. that Kathleen, and hopefully my readers, are brought into their lives and see something that's going on for them for just that moment. And that mix of creating a novel with short stories was the challenge I took this time to find connections back to the two main characters of Viviana and Kathleen, so that they could see the possibilities for themselves in life through other people, through other people's successes, failures, and interactions they were having in life. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to share a little more with you about each of the women. And then one of the stories, which is about halfway through the book, at which time that Kathleen has heard a number of stories by then. And then, as Tammy said, I would really love to get your feedback, questions, comments. So Viviana is the main narrator in this book. She tells her own story. She tells the stories about the other people. So we'll let her speak. I cleaned for Mrs. M. She was the first person to give me a chance to clean her house. You must earn a level of respect and trust to be in a stranger's home with their personal and private belongings. I start early each day, and no two homes that I visit are alike. I don't always meet the owners, and most are not at home when I'm cleaning. My regular jobs are 4 houses every 2 weeks. My planned jobs, my eyes just jumped away. My planned jobs are for weekenders who contact me to say when they will be arriving, and the larger part of the job when they leave. The first visit is to freshen up the house, and the second is to pick up after them. It's not what I thought I would do with my life, but it pays the bills. My special jobs are to follow up after large parties. The Radcliffe family and the Lipinskis are my regular clients. They have parties all the time. Kathleen and I connected, even without sharing the details of our lives, because we know our experiences of coming to America out of need, and that we've each had our struggles. She came as a young teen, first to be a nanny for a wealthy family. I don't know very much about Kathleen, but I do learn a lot about the families whose homes I clean. Thursdays have become my favorite time of week. I appreciate Kathleen's company. I really don't know anything about when she first came here, other than she was a nanny, and I don't know if she has family back in Ireland or why she started working at the dry cleaner. Kathleen has said that the job at the dry cleaner was a godsend, and excuse me, giving her ample time to learn about different types of fabrics and how the fibers are strung together for strength and resiliency of the material. She gets animated when she talks about it. Kathleen says as she joins me on the park bench, I am worried that I won't be able to maintain my rent. The dry cleaning store is no longer paying me a salary, just whatever I make from individual jobs. The daughter has been kind and said she'll bring me the sewing projects and pick them up daily. I said to her, a hem? No problem, but some jobs I'll need more time. She said, my brother is taking over the business and that's how he wants to market it. One day repairs. She said she'll work with me, and of course there'll be less distractions when I'm not at the shop. I'm worried, but I can't say no. I need this job. Now, minus the regular pay, Kathleen is barely getting by. And that's how Viviana and Kathleen meet in the book. One of Viviana's clients asked her to bring some alteration to the dry cleaners, and she meets Kathleen, and their friendship begins. So for the story that I want to share with you tonight, it's told by Viviana on a particular day when the two women are hanging out together. And Viviana is really thinking about the parties that she cleans up after and the work that she's been doing. On my mind this particular Thursday is cleaning for the parties. I work for the Lipinski's parties, and now Gabriella Lipinski sends me monthly to Lorna's place, just a small apartment. She seems lonely to me. No pictures on the walls, very sparse furniture. The apartment reeks of cigarette smoke. Lorna Taylor is a stunning young woman and smart. Even though she's smart, she is still learning. Recently, at one of her aunt and uncle's parties, there was a theft, and I wasn't allowed to clean for 2 days while the police were still investigating. Can you imagine how disgusting the glass rings were on the end tables and the sticky messes on the floor? What a job. Although Mrs. Lipinski always pays me well. Kathleen says, wait, Lorna is not their daughter? I'm confused. Lorna is the daughter of Gabriella Lipinski's brother. Gabriella and her husband Edwin dote on her, and together they offered Lorna a good life. I sit back on the bench, thinking about it. Lorna is a beautiful young woman, but I feel she lives with a shadow of loss. What are you waiting for? Tell me the story of the Lipinskis and their niece, Lorna. Kathleen opens her eyes wide to indicate she's listening. Okay, this one I will have Lorna tell, because it is she that grew up a little with a recent relationship and the theft situation. I take out my folded papers from my bag. I call this passing fancy. You'll see why. I knew you had a story. I'm so glad you're writing them down now. Kathleen assumes her regular listening position. She sits back on the bench and closes her eyes. And from there, we move to the next chapter, which is the story that Lorna is going to tell. I better just hold my tongue. I don't need to talk, don't need to explain. I'll pretend the cat got my tongue, and I don't need to make eye contact with anyone. How many steps would it take to the buffet table? I could shove some food in my mouth and just point at my chewing full mouth if someone attempts to converse. Eddie can do all the talking when he returns. Social Eddie. He can strike up a conversation with anyone. He can talk about anything. I don't need to assure anyone that Eddie will be coming back. He's coming back. He may not be coming back for me, but he'll be back. Eddie doesn't miss a buffet. 11 steps. I've never managed to hold a dish and a glass and drink and eat. Forget the drink. I need to keep a clear head. Lose the drink, just like I lost the illusion of Eddie tonight. I left him in a room, and when I returned, he was gone. Eddie moved charmingly through the couples, lingering just long enough and showering them with the precise amount of distraction. He was in stark contrast to the kid picking up stray glasses, struggling to balance them on his tray, the temporary waiter, dressed in his neat, shiny vest, nevertheless, still looking disheveled. Shine your damn shoes. They're a dead giveaway that you're a fill-in. I notice things like this. Tonight, I notice Eddie. One never plans to be only a temporary person in someone's life. A passing fancy is what Aunt Gabriella calls it. It's what she called Eddie when she met him. Don't sink your teeth in, he's just a passing fancy. Eddie and Lorna. I should have carved it into a tree, but I doubted it was ever really that. Aunt Gabriella and everyone else balancing their drink and dish, making small talk and eye contact. They always knew Eddie wasn't coming back for me. What they didn't know was Eddie was coming back to finish scoping out the place. Eddie won't take one item from Uncle Fred and Aunt Gabriella. The missing bracelets, wallets, and watches of their guest will be blamed on the temporary help, and Eddie will shake his head, agreeing it is a shame the way people act. Sleight of hand is Eddie's expertise. I should rat him out, but he'll turn on me, say I'm an accomplice. He'll prove it by pulling out his Rolex watch from my cleavage. Eddie warned me the first night we slept together. I want all the best for you, baby. I didn't know how he was getting all the best, that the lovely art receptions and after-show parties were his working grounds, until he did his magic here at Aunt Gabriella and Uncle Fred's gathering. I challenged him, and he pulled me in with those astonished eyes, saying he felt hurt that I thought he would ever take anything from my family. How did he stay so cool, so empathetic to the others? the gasping women and the cursing men, when people started to report missing items. He was asked to go with Uncle Fred and a few others to confront the temporary help. The first night I was with him, I thought he was the most romantic man. The way he undressed me, even removing my earrings without me realizing it, then handing me the earrings, that smile, those eyes. Eddie is a magician. But now I know something else, and all the magic ends, doesn't it? When he comes back in, he fills his plate, puts an arm around me, and leads us to a quieter corner. He winks at me, again making me an accomplice. Eddie is undeterred. He feeds me an olive when I attempt to talk. He whispers into my hair, later, just you and me, baby. I will be ever grateful for Aunt Gabriella and Uncle Fred taking me in, saving me from foster homes when the verdict came down and Dad was sent to prison for embezzling, whatever that meant. At 11 years old, I only knew a second parent was being taken from me. Up to then, I thought he was doing an okay job of being mom and dad for the 7 years that had passed since mom died. Then Aunt Gabriella showed up at the court with documents and claimed custody of me. Uncle Fred's lawyer made quick work of the documents. They asked to be my family, wanted me to live with them, just temporarily while Dad was away. Aunt Gabriella was the most beautiful and put together woman I had ever seen. So they moved me into their home, where I had my own bedroom and bathroom. There was a calm feeling in their home that I had never known before. Aunt Gabriella often took me shopping for clothes and matching accessories. She only refused me one thing, talking about Dad, her brother. I'd be released from them if I wanted to be after turning 18 years old. Growing up with Aunt Gabriella and Uncle Fred as guardians, and then going to college, which they paid for, I became a woman. Eddie said a perfect woman. But that wasn't true. I smoked cigarettes. I've hidden it from him and my aunt and uncle through an exhausting routine. After each smoke, the ritual starts with the fresh clothes spray that I carry in my bag. Then I brush the smoke out of my hair, suck on 2 mints, and reapply my lipstick. I then, lastly, roll perfume onto my fingertips. Of course, I've tried to stop. The glamour of cigarette smoking is dead. Now it's about sticking your head out the door or window and smoke and taking in some fast drags of nicotine. Still, it is my vice. Now I find out Eddie isn't perfect either. He uses his skill to rob people of precious trinkets. He grips my upper arm tightly the entire time we are saying our goodbyes. Aunt Gabriella is devastated. Her dinner party ruined. Say something. No, I'm a scaredy cat. I let him take me home to my apartment. I feign a headache and lock myself in. I don't return Eddie's calls. Yet, like magic, he appears at my apartment door. He tells me he is done with these jobs. I shake my head, but I can't quite convey my muddled thoughts. I like the world Aunt Gabriella and Uncle Fred have afforded me. I believed Eddie fit right in. He's still standing there staring at me. I mindlessly take out a cigarette, light it, and inhale deeply. Eddie attempts to pull it out of my hand. What's this? He sounds so disappointed in me. I take another drag. Eddie says he can explain. He had owed money and just needed to quickly make a big killing. He swears he only did it 3 times. I'm almost entranced, but then he adds, I really did it for you. I want you to have all the best, baby. My God, he's just like my father. I take another drag from the cigarette and put it out on the floor between us, untethered from another passing fence. I think maybe Kathleen has fallen asleep, but then I see the smile and she sits up and stretches. Viviana, I don't think you followed your calling. You are a storyteller. She tenderly gets up from the bench and says, I'll expect another installment next week. And I will stop there. Thank you. Thank you for being such fine listeners. I'm not sure if Tammy can set people up so that if they want to come off of mute, and ask any questions they can, or if any of you have questions or comments, I'd love to hear them.
I've got a comment. So this is the third time that I've come to Phyllis's reading about this exact same story. And each time I hear something a little different, I get a little bit more out of it. And I don't understand how that happens. It's the same words. But I think like if you reread a book or reread a chapter, you kind of hear a little bit more. So, thank you. I mean,
I find short stories a little bit annoying because you get us all enticed and then it's gonna end. And you want it to continue.
That's true. A lot of people don't like short stories because they feel, even short stories and novellas as well, because of the limited amount of space you have, you can't do a lot of big description, you can't set a lot of time and place. So you really have to get to the point, drop in and like kind of drop out. So it's like a challenge for the writer, I think. But I could understand how it's frustrating.
But for the reader starts out saying, okay, it's gonna be a short story. But then you become so engrossed that you don't want it to end.
right.
And then it ends and now you just pointed. It's just not fair.
But of course, the whole book then ties it in again with another shorter story tucked in and going through. So my question is, I think I know the answer, but I want to ask anyway. So you wrote, what came first?
Chicken or the egg.
The individual little stories like the Lipinskis and the other ones that kind of come up, or your overarching, excuse me, your overarching story of the whole thing.
Well, the answer is both. I had the idea for a story about Viviana in my head mowing one day. And somehow when I saw her that she would be moving into, she has another career as well, but when she moves into being the cleaning lady, that she would have to know certain people. She would have to work in certain people's homes. So I did have two stories that were already written, but I felt, oh, those are the people that she could work for those people. And so I tweaked those stories to kind of connect back with Viviana. But other of the 6 embedded stories, I wrote particularly for Viviana and Kathleen. Because as a writer, once you get these characters in your head, it's hard to explain, but you start working with them, living with them, talking to them. And so there's one of the stories is about a grandmother, a mother, and a granddaughter. And that one I wrote particularly for Viviana and Kathleen as 3 other women that they should know about what happened to them. So it was both. There were some stories that were already written that I tweaked for this novel, and then there were some that I wrote for this. That's a great question. Do you have a question, Karen?
I enjoy this because I have always been a major fan of short stories and novellas. And my attention span to read a novel is, I've always felt is lacking. And my favorite class that I took when I was in college was a short story. And 40 years later, I still own those textbooks and I read from them. So I can really appreciate the
Was that Diane Koenig? Was that Professor
Diane
Koenig?
Koenig.
Columbia Koenig, a famous professor
The only
from our
textbooks that I still own.
Columbia Community College. That's great. I can't tell.
Phyllis?
Yes, who's this?
Hey, Regina.
Oh, hi, Regina. It's hard for me. I can't see everyone. So
Okay.
it's difficult for me to always-
I was just wondering, when you said that you like the short story, because it comes to a conclusion. Do you ever feel like after you've written it, I wish that I made it longer? Or do you ever go back and think, I could make this into more, I could develop these characters more?
Interestingly,
No.
the majority of time, no. I've visited them, I've worked with them, I'm more or less done with them. But a little phenomenon that's been happening with this book is that maybe because I embedded such separate stories in, is that I still feel that there could be a sequel about just Viviana and Kathleen in this case.
I like that
here's my
idea.
sister. This is my sister. Coming from North Carolina. But that's a great question. Yes, I think not all writers, but I think at some point, we see a lot of story writers who write sequences of the same person or the same characterization. But usually I'm just like, okay, that was good. Who
Move
else
on.
wants to creep into my head?
I'd like a story about Viviana and Kathleen.
Okay.
So Phyllis, can you hear me?
Oh, hello, Diane.
Diane.
Hello, I didn't miss anything on my trafficy ride home. I heard everything. So my question is, how did you arrive at the title of the book?
Oh, that's a great question. More than making ends meet is, I think, a classic line. And I thought for a while you don't hear it anymore. It was kind of an old line. And I thought it would kind of fit these people. And then as I kept thinking about who they were and what they were trying to do, is they were trying to make ends meet. But then I have to tell you, recently I've been hearing it again. People are trying to make ends meet, or it's hard for people to make ends meet these days. And I was like, oh yeah, more than making ends meet. Yeah. So it kind of came as part of developing the two characters. And sometimes you have a working title and then you throw that away at the end. But this kind of came with them. And so I worked with them through it. Thank
And
you for that question.
I love the zipper on the cover. That was great.
It's funny you say that because at the last reading, somebody was like, oh, I love the cover.
So how did you come up with the zipper?
So this book is published by Bedazzled Inc., which is a publishing company in California. And when you first, just process-wise, when you first send out a story or a novel, I sent this particular book to 3 publishers. This publisher contacted me and said they'd like to pick it up. And then you go back and forth with revisions and setting things up. And when we got to the cover, they asked me about what ideas I had. And I said, well, one of them is a seamstress, and one of them, I said, but somehow I felt like there should be a zipper. They went, a zipper, huh? I said, yeah, zipper. And then I thought, but maybe a bench, because they sat on the bench often when they met. And she said, no, that's too much like, too much typical, and Tuesdays with Maury or something, So she said, let me have my designer think about that. And I could tell one of them, the editor and the publisher, one of them wasn't so sure. She was like, oh, zipper, yeah, okay. And then the other one's like, no, that makes sense. More than making ends meet, I think we could do this. And then when they came back with this, I thought it was great. I just thought it was bold, and I don't know, it just seemed to work. And then they both said they liked it as well, so.
So Phyllis, you know that I like that cover so much that I even showed you a blouse that I bought to look like that.
Yes, this is
on it tonight, but I didn't.
this is my friend Lenoir, and yeah, she bought a blouse that looks like a zipper.
Yeah. I really like the story too. Yes,
Where are you? Are you in an office?
I'm in my office. I don't have a job anymore, but I still have an office. Yeah, like my daughters keep telling me, you have to take your stuff off the walls, take your stuff down, but I just can't let go.
It looks nice. I think there's a thing like rate my background, and I would give this definitely a good point.
Is somebody waving there? Is that Phyllis?
It's Phyllis.
I haven't
This is my
read
friend
short
Phyllis. We went
stories.
to high school and met in the Bronx.
I haven't read short stories since we were in Miss Kenny's class, but I could say how much I enjoyed it, all the descriptions of it, and I could appreciate all the beauty of it. But I know that authors usually write from what they know. So who were these characters supposed to be, or are they purely from observation of being on the train to New York and seeing people sewing, or I don't know, or was there any connection in your life of who these people were? And I love the name Viviana.
I like it too.
Okay. Well, one of the biggest connections for me here is that, my Aunt Helen, who I adored, well, my mother's sister, cleaned houses. And she cleaned houses in a very wealthy area, and for some reason, they let me go with her. And I would go, and I just loved it. I loved seeing the houses, and I loved her pride. Like, I always remembered that at the end, when you finished a room, the room was vacuumed, then you shut the light and you don't go back in that room. Like, that was like one of her little, and she took pride in her job. And I think that I in some way wanted to honor her with it. As far as a seamstress, I've known many women who've sewn and, who sew. Excuse me. So I think in this case, Phyllis, the two main characters definitely come from just experiences of my own.
That's very nice to keep them now and forever near. Very nice.
So who's that bad boy in real life?
Who was speaking now? I'm
The
sorry.
bad boy, it's me, Nancy. Who's the bad boy? I want to know.
Oh, the thief. Oh, I'm sorry. I was like,
The thief, yeah.
Remember,
The
there's
thief.
5 stories in here. It took me a minute.
Oh, okay.
I think it's a representation of, that's broader, just a representation of somebody who uses somebody else. You would use a woman, not necessarily by thieving from her family, but by thieving her, kind of thing. There's a metaphorical more.
So Phyllis, how long did it take you to write that book?
That's Barbara.
No, Lenore.
Oh, hi, Lenore. Sorry, I'm still a little clogged in my ears too, I guess, besides my throat. Okay, the big picture, I would say 2 years. And then you get to a point where with a story that you feel like it's where you want it to be. And then you send it out to your readers. Readers are the people you trust to tell you that, I don't know, I don't get it, or it needs more this or that. And then you try to also have a reader that says, I love it, because it just makes you feel better to have at least somebody who, supports it. But I've always been very fortunate to have good readers and get good feedback back from them. And then you would do a revision or 2, or as my other writing friend says, 20, and then you're tired of it all. But at some point, you just have to decide it's done, and you feel solid about it. And then again, in this case, I decided to send it out to some publishers. Then that's another process of months and months, because you have to go on their timeline, and because they're going to edit it, they're going to send it back to you with their ideas, and then they're going to put it into the format. Then you're going to get it again, and you're going to decide on a cover, and your front pieces and back pieces, and all these little parts of it. But it's all part of the process. I enjoy it, I guess, and it certainly feels lovely to see the book and my name, and that it's an accomplished project. So over 2 years altogether, I'd say.
Now with the editor, I'm back.
Yes.
With the editors, this book specifically, did they want you to change something and you did? Or did they want you to change something and you're like, no, it's my book, this is the way I want it?
I have found the editors to be very respectful of your work. if they accepted it, then they kind of basically, I think, feel, they will give you suggestions, whether it's, I mean, it could be something simple, a grammatical thing, or something a little bit different where they say, you know, and it goes back and forth between them and you, and, but you're the final editor, the writer is the final editor.
Were there any issues with this book?
No, not too much. We just kind of went back and forth a few times. Trying to even think which, where, or when.
Certainly not enough to
No,
say, boy, I remember, you know.
no, not really. No, not in this one. Again, it was like, how will we lay it out so that the stories, the separate stories stand out? Or should, you know, how we should do that. It was really more conversational, I think, in our back and forth. This Bedazzled Publishing is in Fairfield, Connecticut, over the Oakland Bridge.
You said Fairfield,
Is
Connecticut?
it, no, I didn't I? California, I'm sorry,
Okay.
California, over the Oakland Bridge, like going near Vacaville, they're right near Vacaville there. And, it's run by 3 women. And I found all of them to be very helpful.
At what point do you know how the story is gonna end, the overall story? And then, at what point did you know that you want to write a sequel?
Okay. In this story, I kind of knew that I was coming toward an end, that I wanted them to get to a point where they were gonna make at least some shift in their life. So that was what I was working toward. As far as the sequel, it's very unusual. I don't usually do that, but it was really after the book came out and I started having comments about, well, there's the short stories, but maybe we didn't know enough about Viviana and Kathleen, that I started thinking, well, you know, they could do this later. And I was like, oh, wait, am I writing about Viviana and Kathleen? Have they moved back into my head? So
And would it be another novella, or would it be something longer, or you have no
I
idea?
guess they'll have to let me know.
Okay.
How much they want me to tell about
Ah.
them. But basically, I probably would not embed all these stories in. It might go back. My first novel, Worn Masks, was one story about a young woman who, after her mother passes away, she's been estranged from her, and then she starts to look back and want to find out more about her. But that's one narrative.
Available here at
Oh.
this.
Oh, thank you, Pat. That's why she comes.
I've written quite a few novels, novellas.
Available here.
Easier or more difficult as time goes on for you to develop your character?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think it's the same, because I think it matters who they are, where they take me. I mean, I have, I don't know, 30, 40 short stories still at home that are in various stages of, you know, maybe I feel they're complete, but maybe they would, if when I look at them again, they wouldn't be. I don't know. But no, once somebody gets there in my head, then I just work with them until they either walk away or I walk away, and that's it. But I wouldn't say it has gotten more difficult, like, oh, who am I gonna write about now? I think that just keeps happening.
So if you have 30 or 40 stories sitting at home
Yeah,
that you just need to finish,
yeah.
how do you get back to which one?
Well, part of my writing routine is to write every day, or at least to sit down for a few hours and reread.
Okay.
So, just the other night, I was thinking about, it's kind of weird. I was thinking about writing something about this cat. And then I thought, wait, no, I wrote about that already. And then I couldn't remember which story had these cats in it. And it turns out I have 2 stories that have cats in it. So then your whole morning's gone, because now I have to read those 2 stories and I have to decide, well, that's what I wanted, or are those the stories that need to go somewhere else now? So keeps me busy.
Yeah.
I don't know what other people are thinking about all day, but
Well, I hope you have a whole lot more stories in you.
oh, thank you.
Just 30 or 40.
That's already.
No, and some of those have been finished and published in just magazines,
Yeah, okay.
which has been wonderful as well. And that's the whole thing. The publishing thing is, it's just a game. You know, you have to find the magazine that is looking for, you know, a particular a story about cats, but don't send them a religious story, or don't send them a story about, a woman jumping off a bridge, because they're not gonna publish it. So you have to get to know the magazines. That in itself is a whole job.
Yeah.
You have to get to know the literary magazines, what they're looking for. You sometimes they'll do themes. So you think, okay, do I have something that fits that theme? And then you go from there. And sometimes sometimes I'm into that. I'm like, I wonder if this would work. And other times I'm like, it's okay. I wrote it. I'm happy with it. It's okay. So you have to be ready for a lot of rejection. Because I also get a numerous amount of stories and or poems. And then most of the small literary magazines come out like twice a year. And they have maybe, 20 stories and 10 poems. So they're going to get hundreds and hundreds of entries in there. They have to make those decisions. Also, I'm finding as I'm aging that not as many literary magazines for older adults. There are two, both of whom I have proudly say have published with. One is Persimmon Tree and one is Passenger Journal. And they're both for people over 50. And they've been, I think, published some really nice work. It is so nice to have all of you here this evening.
I'm gonna take a picture.
She's going to put on gallery and say that.
Phyllis, you never said where we can purchase your book.
It can be purchased on Amazon, or you can go right to the Bedazzled website, and they go through Bookshop, I believe it is.
Or you can contact me directly and I'll mail one out for you.
Okay.
There you go. She really wants to be my agent now. I love it.
You can also get it on Kindle, a Kindle version.
That is true. Yes, you can get a Kindle version. I did have a woman at a reading ask me, probably wouldn't have been tonight because my throat, asked me if I would do an audio version, because she said she can't read so much anymore. And she loved like hearing the voices. So I don't know if that'll happen, but to be short, it'd be easy, right?
I can say from a library perspective that audiobooks are like the fastest growing. That's just like taking off. People are discovering them, and
And who publishes them?
different publishers of the books generally do
Yeah.
an audio version as well.
Yeah, some of them do, yeah. I mean, I'm working with small publishers, but I don't know. Yeah.
Phyllis,
Yes.
do you have anything going right now?
Oh, hi, Al. Thank you for joining us. Al from my other book, Travel Light.
Which there's a copy of.
See, she's gonna be my agent. I'm sorry, Regina, is that you?
I was just asking if you had another story in the works.
Well, yes, Viviana and Kathleen are back, but also I have been working, as I mentioned briefly, on this either finishing or doing more with a cat story that I already have done. Well, that's maybe not done as much as I wanted it to be. Sometimes I write more poetry, sometimes I write more stories. I try not to fight it, I just try to go with the flow of what I'm feeling. Or...
Speaking of poetry, there's
On the street corner.
and Weaver's there.
Is the poetry something that comes to you quickly and you just, something hits you, you hear something in the news or something like that, and then boom, you got to say something, and that's the poetry?
That's Susan, my sister-in-law. That's a good question, Susan. I think for me, the poetry is almost all more personal in that it's a more personal, emotional that I'm kind of talking about. Whereas the fiction, I can really just, let them be as whoever they want to be, and it's not as, I'm not as emotionally attached in that way. But the poetry is also, as you said, you know, do you see something in the news? As some of you know, my daughter Corey, friend Diane and I were in Hawaii right before the fire, the wildfire, and in Lahaina, and to be in that town and then to see that news, yeah, that's really spurred a poem for me. So yeah, I think when it's emotional, it's quicker to poetry. I would tend toward poetry.
Phyllis,
Yes.
you ever consider write short stories and you write poetry? Have you ever considered having approaching like a testing company that does standardized testing and having your work on like, you know, a sixth grade and eighth grade kind of, or high school level test that they have to do in language arts?
Oh, well, I think that's more for me, academic writing. So I did that as part of my job with different kinds of programming and create, working with faculty and so on, but no, I'm very content just working with literary endeavors right now.
Okay, I only ask because I know that our generation, the new generation, isn't really into reading, and I thought if your name got out there and they liked your stuff, it might turn them on to reading beyond the test.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. It's just not something I would probably pursue.
So Phyllis, are you going to have that book read at your next book club reading?
They did bring it up at the book club that I belong to, and they were, we talked a little bit about it. Not everybody had read it, so it's gonna come up again next month at book club as well.
Well, Pat, you have to get on it over there.
November 17th, we're doing, it's on the list. For the
Okay.
19th year, whatever.
Well, I really appreciate you all being here and listening to me. I'm sorry if I was squeaky, and I really, really appreciate all your support. And I thank Tammy and the library again, because this library brings in so many great community events, and to me, libraries and community, it's just